The vast chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward into shadow, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness. Ethereal blue light filtered through suspended holographic displays, casting alien silhouettes across the curved audience platforms. At the center of this ancient arena of interstellar politics stood Ambassador Maya Cole, the lone human representative to the compact, a coalition of 27 spacefaring species that had maintained galactic stability for over 12 millennia. Maya stood with practiced stillness at the speaker's podium, her diplomatic uniform crisp despite the journey from Earth. 100 years had passed since humanity had been granted membership to the Compact, a century spent under technological restrictions and second-class status. A century of being the newcomers, the upstarts, the potential threat that needed constant supervision. Behind her impassive expression, Maya's mind raced. The emergency session had been called with minimal notice, never a good sign in galactic politics. The council chamber buzzed with the quiet murmurs of the assembled representatives, their voices forming an unsettling chorus of clicks, whistles, and modulated tones. The tension in the chamber was palpable. High Counselor Zextran of Vespid, whose exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights, stepped forward from the elevated central platform. 6 compound eyes reflected the blue glow as the insectoid being addressed the assembly. Esteemed members of the Compact Zextran began mandibles clicking precisely between words. We have convened this emergency session to address growing concerns regarding the human expansion initiatives. Maya maintained her diplomatic posture, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had expected this. The Oversight Committee has compiled evidence of 17 instances where human colonies have implemented unauthorized technological adaptations. Zextran continued. While individually minor, the pattern suggests a concerning trend of non-compliance with compact technological progression protocols. On the curved platform to Maya's right, Counselor Dreth of the Meraxians leaned forward, his elongated cranium catching the light. The Meraxian Consortium concurs with these findings. Humans consistently push boundaries rather than respecting established limits. Their creativity, while occasionally useful, represents a potential destabilizing influence if left unregulated. Maya noted how Dreth managed to make creativity sound like a communicable disease. Zextran's compound eyes shifted to Maya. Ambassador Cole, the Council has reviewed your species' formal response to these allegations. We find your justifications insufficient. Around the chamber, delegates from a dozen worlds nodded in agreement. A century of carefully cultivated prejudice had made this moment inevitable. The Council will now vote on Proposition 7291, additional oversight and technological restriction measures for human territories. Zextran's voice echoed through the chamber. This proposal would establish permanent compact oversight stations on all human colonies and implement a mandatory review process for all human technological implementations, regardless of scale. Maya watched as the voting began, holographic indicators flickering above each representative. The outcome was already clear. She could see it in the postures of the elder species, in the way the quantum intellects of Raxus Prime had positioned their communication nodes toward the center, in the subtle pheromone signals being exchanged by the Vespid delegation. The Council had already decided. This vote was merely a formality. Before the final tally is recorded, Zextran announced mandibles, clicking in what Maya had learned to recognize as satisfaction. Does the human representative wish to make a final statement? Maya stepped forward, her movement deliberate and unhurried. She placed a small crystal data cube on the podium, a symbolic gesture that would not go unnoticed among the Council's more traditional members. High Counselor, esteemed members of the Compact. She began, her voice level and carrying clearly through the vast chamber. For 100 years, humanity has strived to be a contributing member of this ancient and respected coalition. We have abided by restrictions no founding member ever faced. We have shared our arts, our sciences, our perspectives, while accepting limits on our growth and development. She paused, letting her gaze move across the assembled representatives. We have maintained these agricultural stations you deem too resource-intensive to operate yourselves. We have staffed these deep space monitoring outposts you found too isolated for your comfort. We have maintained the legacy systems your species have outgrown, but still depend upon. The silence in the chamber deepened as Maya placed her hand atop the crystal cube. This data cube contains United Earth Government Resolution 4287, approved unanimously by the Human Federation Assembly. In accordance with Article 14 of the Compact Charter, humanity hereby formally withdraws from the Compact, effective 30 standard days from this announcement. The silence shattered into a cacophony of voices. Several delegates rose to their feet, communication arrays flashing urgent signals. Zextran's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Maya recognized as alarm. Order! Zextran's amplified voice cut through the chaos. Ambassador Cole, this is unprecedented. No species has voluntarily withdrawn from the Compact in 12,000 years of our shared history. Then, perhaps that speaks to a fundamental flaw in the Compact itself, Maya replied, her voice remaining calm amidst the storm. The withdrawal process will begin immediately. All human personnel will be recalled from Compact facilities. All human technologies will be removed from shared infrastructure. All human-operated stations will be vacated, according to the protocols established in the Contingency Operations Manual. Dreth rose from his seat, his normally composed features showing clear distress. Ambassador Cole, you cannot possibly implement such a withdrawal without causing catastrophic disruption to Compact operations. Maya met his gaze steadily. You have 30 days to determine how to operate without us, Counselor Dreth. I suggest you use that time wisely. With a formal bow, a human gesture she knew discomfited many of the council members, Maya turned and walked from the podium. Behind her, the chamber descended into chaos, but she did not look back. The exodus had begun. The Horizon's Edge flagship of the human diplomatic fleet broke orbit from the Compact's central world of Nexus Prime exactly 14 hours after Maya's announcement. In the ship's command center, displays showed the coordinated departure of hundreds of human vessels from across Compact space. Status update on evacuation protocols, Maya asked, standing before the main strategic display. Kale, her chief of staff, looked up from his console. A former military officer before joining the diplomatic corps, his efficiency had been invaluable in drafting the contingency plans that were now being executed. Phase 1, proceeding on schedule. Ambassador, he reported. All non-essential personnel have begun transit to extraction points. Research stations in the Orion sector have already completed full evacuation. Agricultural facilities in the Cygnus and Eridani sectors are implementing harvesting acceleration protocols to prevent crop loss during transition. Maya nodded, studying the movements highlighted across the galactic map. Any resistance from Compact authorities? Nothing coordinated, Kale replied. Local officials seem too shocked to interfere. We've had a few bureaucratic hurdles at the Arcturus facility, but nothing our legal team can't handle. The charter language on withdrawal is quite explicit, thankfully. And once questioned, they don't want to appear to be violating their own sacred covenant, Maya added, with a hint of satisfaction. What about critical infrastructure? Kale's expression grew more serious. That's where we'll see the first real impacts. Maintenance crews at the Nexus Prime atmospheric processors are already reporting system degradation without human oversight. Similar reports coming in from the Vega Transit Hub and the Deneb agricultural complexes. Exactly as predicted, Maya said quietly. Kale glanced at her. They really didn't understand how dependent they'd become on us, did they? They convinced themselves we were just convenient labor, Maya replied. They never acknowledged that we were the ones actually making their systems work. She tapped a control, zooming the display to the Sol system. Status of homeworld preparations. The Federation Assembly has approved emergency expansion of Earth's orbital facilities to accommodate returning personnel and equipment. Mars and Luna colonies are expanding residential sectors. The Titan manufacturing complex is being retooled to replace compact-sourced components. And defense systems? Kale hesitated briefly. Admiral Kimura reports that our independent defense grid will be at 70% capacity by the 30-day mark. It's not ideal, but sufficient to discourage hasty action from the Council, Maya noted. We don't need to win a conflict, just make it costly enough to encourage diplomacy. A communication alert chimed, and the holographic image of Engineer Valerie Foster appeared above the command table. Her uniform was stained with hydraulic fluid, and fatigue lined her face. Ambassador, we've completed the controlled shutdown of primary systems at the Centauri way station, she reported. But I need to flag something for your attention. The secondary power grid is showing signs of critical instability. It was never designed to operate independently of human oversight. Maya frowned. Is there immediate danger to the station? Not immediate, but within days. Not weeks, Valerie replied. The automated systems are already failing to compensate for fluctuations. Without our maintenance protocols, they'll experience cascading failures. She hesitated. Ambassador, there are still over 4,000 non-human residents on that station. The weight of that knowledge settled across Maya's shoulders. This was the burden of leadership, the consequence of necessary action that affected innocent lives. Document everything, she instructed. Make it clear in the handover protocols what needs to be done. Flag it as critical in the evacuation report. Yes, Ambassador. Valerie's image flickered as a power surge affected her transmission. For what it's worth, the compact engineers here are starting to panic. They've never had to manage these systems themselves. They've had a century to learn, Maya said more sharply than intended. She softened her tone. Complete your team's evacuation as scheduled, but ensure all documentation is thoroughly accessible. As Valerie's image disappeared, Kale approached with a secure data tablet. The Compact Council has requested an emergency meeting. They're not taking this well. I wouldn't expect them to, Maya replied, scrolling through the diplomatic message. They've spent a century convincing themselves we need them more than they need us. Reality is going to be an uncomfortable awakening. Kale studied her with concern. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Maya's gaze returned to the strategic display, where thousands of human evacuation transports were converging toward Earth. It was always going to Kale. But sometimes, you have to be willing to walk away to make them understand your value. 7 days into the human exodus, the Compact Council convened its second emergency session. From her position on the horizon's edge, now stationed at the edge of Sol system, Maya observed the proceedings through an official feed. The chamber that had once projected serene authority now radiated barely controlled panic. Zextrin stood at the central podium compound, eyes reflecting agitation, as various counselors spoke over one another in a break from the usual decorum. The Thanok Agricultural Dome lost 40% of its atmosphere when the environmental systems failed, declared the Marillion representative tentacles, gesticulating wildly. 3 growing cycles will be lost at minimum. The defense grid in the outer rim has degraded to critical levels, added the normally stoic representative from the silicon-based Quatari Collective. 17 sectors are now vulnerable to intrusion from beyond the galactic arm. Dreth of the Meraxians raised his voice above the others. We must establish a clear chain of responsibility for critical systems. The Eridani Manufacturing Guild was supposed to assume control of the Arcturus processing stations, but they claim insufficient documentation was provided during the human withdrawal. All protocols were followed to the letter, Maya murmured to herself as she watched. Beside her, Kale made notes on a secure pad. They're already turning on each other, he observed. Exactly as predicted. On the screen, Zextrin tried to restore order. Counselors, please. This disharmony solves nothing. We must implement the continuity of operations plan developed by the Emergency Response Committee. The plan is fundamentally flawed, countered the representative from Tholus Prime. It assumes knowledge and capabilities that our technical teams simply do not possess. The human systems were integrated at levels we had not fully mapped. Maya watched as recriminations flew across the chamber. Species that had coexisted in carefully balanced diplomacy for millennia were now openly questioning each other's competence and commitment. Ambassador, interrupted a communications officer. We're receiving an emergency transmission from Nexus Station. They're requesting immediate technical assistance. Life support systems are failing in 3 residential sectors. Maya exchanged a long look with Kale. How many civilians? Approximately 7,000, including families of compact diplomatic personnel. She closed her eyes briefly, considering. This was not unexpected. Their models had predicted critical failures beginning in the second week, but the reality of those failures involved living beings now facing deadly consequences. Inform Valerie Foster's engineering team, she decided. Dispatch a technical support vessel with minimum crew. Humanitarian assistance only focused on life support systems. The Council will see this as a weakening of our position, Kale cautioned. Perhaps, Maya acknowledged. Or they might recognize it as evidence that humans understand the difference between political statements and needless suffering. She turned back to the screen, where the Council session had devolved further into factional arguments. Unlike some, 16 days after the announcement of humanity's withdrawal, the first formal request for negotiation arrived from the Compact. Maya sat in her private office aboard the Horizon's Edge, reviewing the carefully worded message. They're suggesting Free Haven Station as the negotiation venue, she noted to Kale, who stood by the viewport gazing out at the assembled human fleet. Neutral territory, technically outside both Compact and Human Federation space. A symbolic choice, Kale observed, neither conceding to us by coming to Earth, nor forcing us back to Nexus Prime. They're also requesting that we halt the final phase of withdrawal until negotiations conclude. Maya's expression remained neutral, but satisfaction flickered in her eyes. They specifically mentioned the processing centers in the Proxima and Tau Ceti systems. The agricultural heartlands, Kale noted. They must be facing significant food security concerns already. Maya nodded, setting down the data tablet. Have we received the latest assessment from Valerie's team? Yes. The situation on Nexus Station has stabilized with our intervention, but it's a temporary fix at best. Without comprehensive human technical support, they'll face critical failures again within weeks. Rising, Maya moved to the star map displayed on her office wall. It showed the current distribution of human and compact forces, with the withdrawal nearly 70% complete. Earth glowed at the center, surrounded by the protective screen of returning human ships. The Council's position is weakening by the day, she said quietly. But we can't push them too far too fast. Their pride will force them to catastrophic decisions if they feel entirely cornered. You think they'd actually attempt military action? Maya considered. Not the Council as a whole, but individual species might act independently if desperation sets in. The Vespid especially have a history of preemptive strikes when they perceive existential threats. She turned to face her aide. Send word to Admiral Kimura. I want our defense grid at maximum readiness during negotiations. Kale nodded, making a note. And the Council's request to halt withdrawals. We'll pause the Proxima and Tau Ceti evacuations as a gesture of good faith, Maya decided. But accelerate everything else. I want our position as strong as possible when we sit down at that table. She returned to her desk, beginning to draft her response to the Council. One more thing, she added, without looking up. Contact Frank Bennett at the Federation Assembly. I want him present at the negotiations. His experience with the Compact's original charter will be valuable. Of course, Ambassador. Kale turned to leave, then hesitated. Maya, you predicted all of this. The system's failures, their inability to maintain the infrastructure, the factional disputes. How did you know they'd fall apart so quickly? Maya's hands stilled over her keyboard. Because they built an empire on regulation, rather than innovation, Kale. They created systems too complex for any one species to fully understand, then relied on specialists from across the compact to maintain different pieces. When they restricted our development but put us to work across all those systems, they made themselves dependent on us, without admitting it. She looked up, her expression hardening. We became the only species in the compact with a holistic understanding of how everything actually functions. And now we're using that against them. No, Maya corrected firmly. We're simply showing them the true cost of the inequality they insisted upon. Sometimes, the only way forward is to let broken systems fail. Freehaven Station hung in the darkness between stars, its ancient structure, a monument to galactic diplomacy that predated even the compact itself. Built by a now-extinct species, the station had served as neutral ground for interstellar negotiations for over 15,000 years. The Human Federation diplomatic shuttle docked at the designated berth, its sleek design contrasting with the weathered grandeur of the station. Maya stepped onto the arrival platform flanked by Cale and Frank Bennett, the Federation's foremost expert on compact law. "Impressive," Frank murmured, adjusting his formal diplomatic attire. In his 70s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades navigating interstellar politics, he brought gravitas to their delegation. "I've studied the architectural records, but they don't capture the scale." "The precursors built to intimidate," Maya replied quietly. "Stay sharp. The council delegation will be waiting in the grand concourse." They proceeded through the station's vaulted corridors, passing members of various species who watched the human delegation with mixtures of curiosity, resentment, and in some cases, barely concealed desperation. News of the ongoing systems failures across compact space had spread, and with it, the realization of how dependent their civilization had become on human expertise. The grand concourse opened before them, a circular chamber with a transparent dome revealing the star-filled void above. At the center stood a massive table carved from what appeared to be a single piece of petrified wood from some ancient world. High Counselor Zextran awaited them along with Counselor Dreth and representatives from 5 other major compact species. Maya noted the absence of delegates from the Outer Rim worlds, a telling detail about the current power dynamics within the fracturing compact. Ambassador Cole, Zextran, greeted her mandibles, moving in the Vespid approximation of formal acknowledgement. "The Council appreciates your willingness to engage in dialogue during this transitional period." "High Counselor," Maya responded with a precise bow. "The Human Federation remains committed to peaceful relations with all species within or outside the compact framework." The subtle emphasis on outside did not go unnoticed. Dreth's elongated fingers twitched slightly, a Meraxian sign of agitation. "Please be seated," Zextran indicated the ancient table. "We have much to discuss." As the delegations arranged themselves, Maya studied the faces across from her. The stress of the past weeks had taken its toll. Zextran's normally immaculate exoskeleton showed signs of hasty, molting a physiological response to severe stress in Vespids. Dreth's cranial bioluminescence pulsed in irregular patterns, indicating sleep deprivation or extreme anxiety. "Let us speak plainly," Zextran began once formalities were observed. "The human withdrawal has created unprecedented difficulties across compact territories. Critical systems are failing. Supply chains are disrupted. The stability of our 12,000-year civilization is at risk." Maya kept her expression neutral. "We regret any hardship experienced by civilian populations. Our humanitarian assistance to Nexus Station demonstrates our commitment to preventing suffering where possible." "Token gestures," Dreth interjected, his normally melodious voice sharp with frustration. "While you know perfectly well that without full human technical support, dozens of major habitation centers will fail within months." Frank Bennett leaned forward slightly. "Counselor Dreth, with respect, the Human Federation's withdrawal has proceeded exactly according to the protocols established in the original Compact Charter. Article 14 specifically outlines the process for member species to exit the coalition, We have followed those guidelines to the letter. The letter, perhaps, but not the spirit, countered the quantum intellect representative, their translation module, rendering their thoughts into standard speech. The Charter never envisioned a scenario where a member species had become so fundamentally integrated into compact infrastructure. That is precisely the point, Maya responded. Humanity was integrated into your infrastructure while simultaneously being denied equal status. We maintained your systems, staffed your outposts, operated your agricultural centers, all while being subjected to technological restrictions and exclusion from key decision-making processes. Zextrin's compound eyes fixed on Maya. Ambassador Cole, let us set aside recriminations about past policies. What matters now is the present crisis. What would it take for humanity to reconsider its withdrawal? Maya had waited 23 days for this question. Now she placed a data crystal on the table, similar to, but distinct, from the one she had used to announce humanity's departure. This contains the Human Federation's proposed Equal Cooperation Treaty, she said, her voice clear and confident. It outlines a new framework for human participation in galactic affairs. Dreth reached for the crystal with visible eagerness, but hesitated before touching it. What are your terms? Not terms, Counselor. Principles. Maya met each delegate's gaze in turn. First, humanity will not rejoin the existing compact. That structure has proven fundamentally flawed. A murmur ran through the compact delegation. Zextrin's mandibles clicked rapidly. The compact has maintained peace for 12 millennia. Peace is not the same as justice or progress, Maya countered. The compact has also maintained inequality and stagnation. Instead, we propose a new alliance based on 3 core principles. She raised one finger. Equal technological access and development rights for all participating species. A second finger joined the first. Proportional representation in governance with no species holding veto power over another's development. Finally, a third finger. Collaborative security and infrastructure management with transparent knowledge sharing across all systems. The silence that followed was profound. The compact representatives exchanged glances, their various biological expressions of shock, transcending species barriers. This is revolutionary, Dreth finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. It is necessary, Maya replied simply. The current crisis has demonstrated that the old model is unsustainable. Zextrin's compound eyes fixed on the data crystal. And if we reject this proposal, if we insist on humanity returning to the compact under existing protocols. Maya's expression remained diplomatic, but her voice carried steel. Then, we complete our withdrawal as planned. The Human Federation will establish its own networks, develop its own technologies without restriction, and form bilateral relationships with any species that wishes to engage with us directly outside the compact framework. The threat was clear. Humanity would not only leave, but would potentially fracture the compact by creating alternative alliances. You would destroy 12,000 years of stability out of pride. Zextrin's mandibles clicked in agitation. No, High Counselor, Maya replied evenly. We would replace an unstable system with one built on mutual respect and genuine cooperation. The question is whether the compact species are willing to evolve, or if you will cling to hierarchy until it collapses entirely. Frank Bennett spoke up, his experienced diplomatic voice, adding weight to Maya's position. Our analysis indicates that without human technical support, critical compact systems will experience catastrophic failures within 60 days. Agricultural production will decline by 47% within 6 months. Defense capabilities in the outer sectors will degrade to pre-compact levels within 1 standard year. Kale silently placed another data tablet on the table, displaying projections that confirm these assessments. This isn't a negotiation, Dreth realized aloud. It's an ultimatum. No, Counselor, Maya corrected gently. It's an opportunity for all of us to build something better than what came before. The compact delegates huddled together, urgent discussions taking place in multiple languages, as translation systems struggled to keep pace with the emotional exchanges. Finally, Zextran turned back to Maya. "We will need time to consult with our respective governments. This goes beyond our authority as representatives." "Of course," Maya agreed. "The Human Federation will pause all withdrawal operations for 7 standard days while you consider our proposal." She rose from her seat. "But, understand this, High Counselor, the old compact is already dead. Whether you choose to help build what comes next is now your decision." As the human delegation departed, leaving the compact representatives, staring at the crystal containing humanity's vision for the future, Kale leaned close to Maya. "Do you think they'll accept?" Maya's gaze remained forward, her pace measured and confident. "They don't have a choice. They just don't fully realize it yet." The Great Archive of Nexus Prime held the collected knowledge of 27 civilizations, a repository of wisdom spanning millennia. Its central chamber, rarely used except for the most momentous occasions, had been prepared for the signing of the Equal Cooperation Treaty. 38 days after humanity had announced its withdrawal from the compact, representatives from 22 species gathered beneath the archive's ancient dome. 5 compact members had refused to participate, choosing isolation over the new order, but their absence did little to diminish the historic significance of the moment. Maya stood at the center of the chamber, beside the same pedestal where the original compact charter had been signed 12,000 years earlier. Beside her, Zextran represented the transitional authority that would guide the former compact worlds into the new alliance. "The path to this moment has been difficult," Maya addressed the assembled delegates, her voice carrying through the perfect acoustics of the chamber. "Change always is. But today, we take the first step toward a truly equal partnership among the stars." She looked around at the gathered representatives, some still resentful, others cautiously optimistic, a few openly enthusiastic about the possibilities that technological equality might bring. "The Equal Cooperation Treaty does not erase our differences," she continued. "It celebrates them. It recognizes that diversity of perspective, of biology, of approach, these are strengths, not weaknesses to be regulated into conformity." Zextran stepped forward, compound eyes reflecting the solemn lights of the archive. "For 12,000 years the compact maintained a certain kind of stability. But stability without growth becomes stagnation. Today, we acknowledge that truth, and we choose a more challenging but ultimately more rewarding path forward." One by one, representatives approached the ancient pedestal. Each placed their hand appendage or sensing organ upon the treaty document, registering their biometric signature according to their species tradition. When Maya's turn came, she placed her palm flat against the document's surface. The sensation of countless microscopic scanners reading her genetic code sent a slight tingle through her fingers, the same technology that had recorded the signatories to the original compact still functioning after 12 millennia. "With this act," intoned the archive's custodian, a member of the long-lived Thexian species, "the treaty is ratified and recorded in the Great Archive. So shall it be remembered for all time." As the formal ceremony concluded, delegates broke into groups, already beginning the practical discussions that would shape implementation of the new alliance. Maya found herself approached by Dreth, the Meraxian counselor, who had been among humanity's strongest critics. "Ambassador Cole." He greeted her, his cranial bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that denoted respect, a significant change from their previous interactions. "I must acknowledge the wisdom in your approach, though it pains my pride to do so." "Counselor Dreth," Maya inclined her head. "Growth often begins with discomfort. Your willingness to embrace this change speaks well of you and your people." Dreth's elongated fingers made a gesture of philosophical acceptance. "The evidence became irrefutable. When your engineer Valerie Foster returned with her team to restore the atmospheric processors on Nexus Station, the contrast was undeniable. Systems that our finest minds could not stabilize in weeks, your people repaired in hours." Different perspectives lead to different approaches to problem solving, Maya observed. The treaty ensures that all our peoples will now benefit from that diversity of thought, rather than suppressing it. Indeed, Dreth hesitated, then continued more quietly. There is something I have been curious about, Ambassador. Your withdrawal strategy, it proceeded exactly as if you had anticipated every response from the Council. Almost as though we had modeled the scenario extensively, Maya suggested with a slight smile. Of course we did, Counselor, for decades. Surprise flickered across Dreth's features. You planned this confrontation. Not the confrontation specifically, Maya clarified. But we understood our position within the compact systems better than you did. We knew exactly what would happen if we stepped away. It was simply a contingency plan until your council made it necessary. Dreth's bioluminescence pulsed, with what might have been grudging admiration. The compact underestimated humanity's strategic patience. A common mistake when dealing with species that have shorter lifespans, Maya acknowledged. Our brevity teaches us to think both more urgently and more adaptively. Across the chamber, Maya spotted Kale in conversation with representatives from 3 former compact worlds, already discussing implementation of technology-sharing protocols. Nearby, Frank Bennett was explaining constitutional governance principles to a group of previously restricted species, their attention rapt as they contemplated self-determination for the first time in millennia. If you'll excuse me, Counselor, Maya said, I believe there's still much work to be done. Indeed, Ambassador Cole. Or should I say Special Envoy Cole. I understand the new Governance Council has appointed you to oversee the transition. Maya nodded in acknowledgement. A temporary position until the new structures are firmly established. Then leadership must rotate as the treaty requires. As she moved through the chamber, Maya felt the weight of the past weeks, the tension, the calculated risk, the moments of doubt begin to lift. The first human ships had already returned to compact space, bringing engineering teams to critical infrastructure across a dozen worlds. Agricultural stations were coming back online. Defense systems were being upgraded rather than merely restored. She paused at a viewport overlooking the vast metropolis of Nexus Prime. Below, the lights of the city glowed steadily, no longer flickering with power fluctuations. In orbit, above vessels from a dozen worlds, moved in coordinated patterns, the beginnings of the integrated fleet that would replace the old compact defense forces. Ambassador Valerie Foster approached, looking exhausted but satisfied. The engineer had spent weeks directing emergency repairs across former compact space. The atmospheric processors are now operating at 112% of previous capacity. We implemented those efficiency protocols the Council had rejected 3 years ago. Well done, Maya said warmly. And the reactor cores? Stabilized. The Eridani engineers are actually quite brilliant once they're allowed to innovate. We've been exchanging techniques. They have fascinating approaches to plasma containment that we never considered. Maya smiled. Exactly as it should be. The engineer hesitated. There's something else you should know. Those 5 holdout worlds that refused to join the treaty, 3 of them have quietly reached out about technical assistance. Unofficial channels, of course. They're still too proud to admit they need help publicly. Arrange the assistance, Maya decided immediately. No political conditions attached. Show them what true cooperation looks like in practice, not just in words. As Valerie departed to coordinate this new initiative, Maya found a moment of solitude by the archive's ancient window. The stars beyond seemed brighter somehow, full of renewed possibility. Kyle joined her, offering a drink from the celebration that had spontaneously formed among the delegates. To the end of the compact, he proposed raising his glass. Maya shook her head slightly, adjusting the toast. To the beginning of something better. As they drank, Kale's expression grew thoughtful. You know, when we first developed the withdrawal contingency, I never truly believed we'd implement it. It seemed too radical, too risky. Sometimes the greatest risk is in maintaining a broken status quo, Maya replied. The compact had become exactly what its founders feared, a force for stagnation rather than cooperation. It needed to end for something better to emerge. And has it? Is this truly better? Maya gestured toward the chamber, where former adversaries now engaged in animated discussions about shared projects and integrated technologies. Look at them, Kale. For 12,000 years, those species maintained careful distance from one another, each protecting their specialized knowledge, each maintaining the hierarchy that kept them in their assigned place. Her voice softened with satisfaction. Now they're talking, really talking, sharing ideas rather than just regulations. That alone makes this worth everything it cost to get here. Beyond the viewport, a ship departed Nexus Prime, its hull bearing the markings of both human and Thexian design, the first visible product of the new technological cooperation protocols. Maya watched it ascend into the darkness, carrying with it the promise of what equal partnership among the stars might achieve. "The old compact is dead," she said quietly. "A new era of equal cooperation has begun." And among the stars, possibility bloomed.